3 nights, and there's the paperwork out there, and you still have plenty of time to sign up for the 2 following up events. I guess one is next Tuesday. Wendy, is that right? Next Thursday. See, no one should let me do those things. I should just follow instructions. So I want to thank many people who helped put this together. I want to recognize Rabbi Leonard Schoolman, who couldn't be with us tonight, but actually was the first person who came to my office and suggested we run this kind of series and helped with the planning for it. I want to, of course, thank Weill Cornell, New York Presbyterian, for partnering with us. They have really beautiful new space here for all kinds of community events, and you'll see many materials out on the table of other activities and events they have for you and your health that you might find valuable. And again, just thank them for the beautiful space. Again, session 2 and session 3, you can still sign up for. Session 2 next Thursday is about important documents to have and have filled out and to know where they are. Knowing where they are is actually half the challenge once you actually get the correct documents. I have gone through that experience with my parents. November 29th will be the 3rd evening, and it's about hospice and palliative care, including your family's end-of-life decisions. Also really crucial things to know about. I always say nobody ever wants to think about these things, and I get it, and yet we all have to. And we should really do this in a thoughtful, planning way, working with our families and our healthcare providers. And in life in general, the earlier you do things, the more options you realize you have for yourselves. And the later you put something off, the least options you have for yourself. So I'm voting for think about it earlier, try to get things done and ready. All right, so today's program is going to be covering both Social Security and Medicare, 2 crucial programs for us. The first representative is Michael Martin, who is a principal at Marius Wealth, and he will be able to take Q&A after he presents. And there are people who will walk around waving cards, and we're going to ask you to write your questions down, and then we will be able to give them to people, because sometimes 3 of you have the exact same question, so we have found that actually having you write them down makes it much easier for the presenter to be able to get through things. So Brad right there has cards. Just raise your hand if you'd like a card and you don't have one, and then somebody will be going around to picking them up as well. After Michael Martin, we will hear from Michelle Burney, who's a consultant with the HIICAP program. I love this name. You always have to say it carefully. Health Insurance Information and Counseling Program at the New York City Department for the Aging. And so she will be talking about Medicare and how to make the right decisions within the Medicare program, because there are lots of options and they can get confusing. The speakers' bios are on the program you picked up outside. We've mentioned the index cards and to raise your hands. My assignment is done, unless Wendy tells me, okay. Oh, my assignment's not done, because for anyone who doesn't know Wendy Brennan, standing right there, she handles my community events and seniors issues, and she does a phenomenal job, time in, time out. So thank you, Wendy, for all your great work. And Brad Usher is my chief of staff right there in front, who's also doing double duty tonight. And I'm actually heading to speak somewhere else, so I won't be with you, but I know it's going to be a very good presentation, and hopefully I'll be able to be back for the other ones. And I want to thank you very much. Thank you, and pass you the,
Okay.
Ooh, you put that back for
Excellent.
your height.
Great. Thank you, Senator Krueger, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's program titled Social Security Planning, What Baby Boomers Need to Know to Maximize Retirement Income. As Senator Krueger said, my name is Michael Martin. I'm principal, financial advisor of the firm Marius Wealth Management, a financial advisory firm here in New York City. And just a couple of housekeeping issues, if I may. We have a lot of stuff in not so much time to go through tonight. Social Security will run probably about 45 minutes, I guess, Liz, including question and answers. And I can assure you, you're going to have some questions. So I'm going to ask, just so we can get through the content, and there's quite a bit of it, if you could hold off on questions until afterwards, and this way we can stay focused. The other thing also before you is an evaluation form. It's the green sheet. We're always looking for input from people like you in terms of how we can improve these programs, and we'd be grateful if you take the time perhaps at the end or during maybe to fill that out. And either hand it to myself or Wendy afterwards. So that said, let's jump in. But first I have to say, I told my wife tonight that I'm doing this seminar on Social Security, and it happens to be her birthday, so I gave her a pass. She didn't have to come. But she told me, I'll come to your next Social Security seminar if you can show me that Social Security is sexy. And I looked at her, I said, ooh, okay, well, I have a job to do, so let's get to it. No guarantees, though. So let's start right here. There's my disclaimer. First question is, you probably recall back when your parents retired, they probably didn't think too much about Social Security. They may have retired at age 62, 65. Whenever it was, they went down to the local Social Security office, they filled out some forms, they collected their benefit, the day was done. They took their benefits for granted, and they probably didn't ask a lot of questions. Well, I'm sure they didn't have as many choices back then in terms of their benefits as individuals like yourself today, and certainly our future generation. Baby boomers are approaching Social Security questions in a very different way. So to jump right into it, let's start. When should you start receiving retirement benefits? Well, as you approach retirement, the when to claim Social Security can actually be one of the most important questions that you're going to answer, and one of the most important decisions, and maybe one of the hardest financial decisions that you're going to make, because there's so many other variables that come into place. But there are really three stock answers, and most of you probably know this. The first is at your full retirement age, and that's between ages 66 and 67. And there's before your retirement age, and that is as early as age 62. Now, that guy does not look like he's 62, but anyway, he's on my slide. And then, of course, you can start taking benefits as late as age 70, and that is age 70. So why is it, again, such an important decision? Well, there is no one-size-fit-all answer to that question. Everybody's unique. Everybody has their own set of financial circumstances that make them different. And therefore, your decision as to when to take, or if you're taking already, is going to be a very different outcome each time. But I'll tell you this, it starts with this. When it's important is because when you take benefits can significantly affect your overall retirement income. And again, with pensions disappearing, if some of you are so lucky to have a pension, that's great, but our younger generation now, as you know, probably won't be so fortunate with pensions disappearing on the horizon. So now the onus is on individuals to take greater responsibility of their retirement plans vis-a-vis their companies or their individual retirement accounts. And Social Security still remains one of the major vital sources of lifetime income. And number three, if you're married and you're taking benefits, the timing of when you take your benefit can affect your spouse, but also the survivor income should you predecease your spouse. So what are some things that you should consider? Well, there's a lot to consider, and we'll just go down the list here. The first is your full retirement age, which we'll cover, and your benefit calculation. Number two is the amount of your future benefit and the effect of early or delayed retirement, whether you decide to retire early or decide to work later on in your years. Number three, how long you expect retirement last? How long basically you think you're going to be able to work, life expectancy. Number four, maybe you never want to give up working. You love working, it's fulfilling, and you don't need the benefits right now. So a decision as to whether you plan to work, and that's going to certainly affect your benefits, taxes, et cetera. Number five, other sources of retirement income, which we'll cover. And number six, income taxes. That's a big one. We'll cover that also. And lastly, and maybe most important, is by the decisions you make in terms of when you claim your benefit, early or late, how it's going to affect your spouse going forward. And they certainly have decisions to make too. So what is your full retirement age? I'm sure most of you are here, so you probably know that, but we'll cover it anyway. that is the age with which you can receive a full unreduced benefit. No haircuts. That's usually between the ages 66 and 67. I'd probably say for most of you in here is between that, but it may be give or take a year or so. But that is the full unreduced age. That's also known as the primary insurance amount. And you'll hear me describe that later on in the presentation, or the acronym PIA. So now let's examine closely how much you'll receive should you decide to take your benefits earlier. Now, I'm sure as many as you know, you can take benefits, if you're not already doing so, as early as age 62. But it works like this. Now, in the column to the right, I'm used to having a pointer, so I'm going to try this here. This is age 66 is the full retirement age. You see that's $1,800. That is the full unreduced amount. Now, you can take your benefit at age 62, but what you'll see here is that if you take it the 4 years earlier or so, you'll take a benefit reduction of about between 28 and 32%. Now, for some, that's a lot of money. So you have to understand that by taking that benefit earlier, if for those of you who have taken benefits early, you probably noticed a lower amount, and you had comparisons, you had decisions to make than if you had taken it at your full retirement age or later, as late as age 70. But here's the thing. At age 62, what you've done, effectively, the flip side of this is that you've opened up the income source. Now you have income coming in much earlier. You're not waiting until the age of 66. So effectively, you got cash coming in now 48 to 60 months earlier. And that's an important consideration. Let's look at what happens if you decide to take your benefit late. That is, the latest that you can take your benefit is age 70. So back to my pointer here. This is age 70 here. You can see that number, and I can't quite see it on the screen. It's 2376. That number is quite a bit higher than if you take it at age 66. Now, like if you took the benefits earlier, you took an 8% haircut for each year you took it earlier. Every year you wait to delay your benefits, it's 8% more. So collectively, if you wait until the age of 70, your benefit, again, is going to increase 8% every single year, but that's going to be about 32% roughly more than if you took it at age 66, which we're assuming is your full retirement age. Am I going too fast for anybody? Okay, just throw something at me if I'm going too fast. So again, the benefit at age 70 will be about 32% more than if you collect it at age 66. So this is where it gets really interesting, and I love this slide. I put both these charts together, and this really highlights the dramatic differences if you take your benefit at age 70 versus age 62. And let's take a look. The right-hand column is age 70, 66 here. I'm trying to hit it here from this angle. And then, of course, age 62. Well, from age 70, 62, your benefit is almost 77% more increase than if you take it at age 62. That's a very big difference. That's a lot of income. But again, you can't take that income. You don't have cash coming in. You decided to put it off until age 70. If you're somebody who needs the income much sooner and you don't have other retirement sources to draw on, this is probably going to be a less likely scenario. And we'll cover that as we go forward. So again, what the chart doesn't show, if you had opened up, started taking benefits all these years here, we did the math on that, and that's a cumulative total. That is, if you took benefits between age 62 and 70, a cumulative total of almost $130,000. That's a lot of money. Now, this doesn't include what's called cost of living increases, or COLAs. There's simply adjustments to your benefit that match inflation. I believe for those of you collecting benefits this year, 2019, the cost of living increase will be about 2.8%, I believe. Okay, so that helps. That keeps up with cost of living and inflation. That's usually measured to an economic index called the Consumer Price Index. Another conversation. So some key questions for you to ask is it better to opt for a smaller monthly benefit at age 62, but receive it for a longer period of time? Or is it better to take it at the age of 70 and receive the highest monthly benefit possible? Tough question. It's more difficult than it appears. Again, there's no one-size-fits-all answer. It depends on so many circumstances. It depends on other sources of retirement income, how long you expect retirement to last, taxes, spouse, you name it. And we'll cover it a little bit more into the presentation. So back to the question, how long will retirement last? Well, I like to tell people it's probably going to last longer than you think. When I advise clients at our firm, I always say that you should really plan on living longer than you think you will, only because I just see that happens more often than not. With advances in medical technology, medicines, et cetera, it's something that you have to consider carefully. The last thing we want to do is recipients of our benefits is to outlive our income. The Social Security Administration says that according to them, 1 out of every 4 retirees will live past the age of 90, and 1 out of every 10 will live past the age of 95. So as I say, you may want to plan on living a nice long life so you don't outlive your income. So this question comes up a lot is, well, if I continue to work, Mike, will I still be able to collect benefits? Well, the answer is absolutely yes, but it comes with some strings attached. So, and it works like this. If you're under your full retirement age, earnings from a job will reduce your Social Security benefit, and we'll go into that in the next slide. It's not until you reach your full retirement age, whether it's 66 or 67 or whatever it is, where the earnings will not affect your Social Security benefit. Excuse me one sec. Now the fun part. Let's do the math part on this. All right, so it works like this. If you are younger than your full retirement age, it goes like this. $1 on the right-hand column, $1 in benefits that you receive will be withheld for every $2 in earnings you have that exceed about $17,000 in 2018. Now that number will go up slightly in 2019. I don't have those numbers yet. If the year in which you reach full retirement age, not at your full retirement age, but the year of, okay, that number is the follows. $1 in benefits will be withheld for every $3 in earnings that you have over $45,000 in 2018. And it's not until you reach full retirement age or after where earnings will not affect your benefit at all. Now, I take pause on this, and I like to say this, and I'll say it again. Please do not let the annual earnings test discourage you from deciding to work in your later years. That's the last thing we want. We as advisors, we encourage clients to work as long as they possibly can. As long as they get fulfillment and they get satisfaction, and yeah, they're making a couple of bucks here and there. One way to avoid the earnings test simply is to wait until your full retirement age or later before you apply for benefits. Now, another thing I want to say also, these numbers right here, you have to understand that the money that is withheld is not truly taken away from you. In other words, Social Security doesn't want to penalize you for deciding to work in your later years. How it works is this. Your monthly benefit, once you turn full retirement age, your monthly benefit will actually start to increase, okay, to make up for those benefits that were withheld. Is that clear? No. Okay, I'm going to try to explain it another way. In other words, if you're working and benefits are withheld, your monthly benefit will actually start to increase at your full retirement age, all right, to simply take into account those months that it was being withheld. So in other words, you're going to get more of a benefit, and that's through what's called delayed credits we're going to talk, and that's going to start at full retirement age. Now, it's not going to happen all that year. It's going to be over the course of several years, but it does start to kick in, and that money that was withheld because you were working will slowly be paid back to you in the form of a higher benefit starting at your full retirement age. I'm seeing a couple confused faces here. What I'd be happy to do is I'd be happy to explain that. It is a little confusing. I'd be happy to explain that more offline if you approach me later on. Okay? So, what retirement income will you have? Well, this is one of the most important factors to consider as you're deciding when to take your benefits, is how will it affect your overall income plan. Most people have income from different sources, naturally Social Security, can't see that, job earnings, pension benefits if you're so fortunate, IRAs, savings, and investments. So a very important question you should ask yourself if you haven't already is how much retirement income do you need, and how does Social Security fit into that plan? Well, back to what we said originally, if you have less than adequate income from other sources, the answer is going to be somewhat straightforward. You're going to have no choice but perhaps take early benefits. However, if you've been fortunate enough to accumulate other retirement assets, you have other sources of income, et cetera, well, then you're going to have some flexibility and you'll have more choices that you can make. But what's important to understand, given the first two scenarios, is it important, you have to ask yourself, does it make sense to tap other retirement assets first? That is your 401k, 403, pension, IRA, whatever, okay? And let your benefits continue to grow and not take them so they can gain and you earn those delayed credits? Or does it make sense perhaps to start taking your benefits earlier? Take a discounted benefit, okay, because you're taking it before your full retirement age. But meanwhile, let your IRAs and your 401ks and your pension, whatever, your 403b, let them continue to grow. You have to understand that if you have a 401k or an IRA, you're not required to take distributions, what they call required minimum distributions, until, and I'm sure many of you know this, until the age of 70 and a half. So does it make sense for you to let that continue to grow tax-free? Maybe that account is doing fantastic. You're making great returns. You love the money manager. You don't want to touch that. You don't want to draw income. So maybe it would behoove you to start taking early benefits. So this is a big one. Will your benefit be taxable? It comes to a surprise, I find, to a lot of retirees that their Social Security benefit is taxed. There are over 25 million recipients of Social Security individuals in this country who are getting taxed on their benefits. And, I'd like to say this. It does come at somewhat of a shock, but, by knowing it's out there and by taking certain steps to plan for it financially, starting perhaps with a financial plan or talking with somebody, there are ways to minimize those taxes, but it's important that you know that it's out there. But it works like this. I'd say that the majority of people, probably in the tri-state area, I'm going to say that probably up to 85% of their benefits are taxable. And it comes down to this. If you're a single and you make over $34,000, up to 85% of your benefits are going to be taxed. And if you're married and you file jointly and you make over $44,000, again, up to 85%. Now, in the tri-state area, these numbers are probably a little bit more realistic. It's pretty difficult to live on less than that. But, like I said, by knowing that the tax factor is out there, you can plan for that and mitigate the tax bite later on. So how will your decision affect your spouse? And this is a big one. I want to spend a little extra time on this. First, we're going to talk about spousal benefits in the traditional sense. Then I want to show you one of the few innovative strategies that are still left that wasn't cut by Congress some years back, called the restricted application strategy, that enables certain individuals to really maximize their Social Security income. But let's jump in here. If you're married, you'll need to understand how your decision to collect your own benefit will affect your spouse's benefit during retirement. Your decision can also affect the survivor's benefit that your spouse is entitled to. That is, when you decide to claim, whether it's early or late. And your spouse certainly has decisions to make too. Together, you need to decide what the best combination of claiming ages is based on earnings, life expectancy, other variables as well. And we're not going to go into it too much, but there are other people, such as dependent children, or perhaps a former spouse if you're divorced, that may be entitled to your benefits also, based on your earnings record. That is for another conversation, so we're not really going to jump into that today. So if you're married and both you and your spouse have worked in jobs covered by Social Security, you're both entitled to benefits based on your earnings record, and that's usually 100%, as we discussed, of your full retirement amount. Now, this is usually, again, this is the full unreduced amount. Additionally, If one spouse has a lower lifetime earnings, he or she may be entitled to a spousal benefit based on the higher earning spouse's work record. And that's usually 50% of the higher earning spouse's benefit. There are some conditions to this, all right? The spouse must be at least age 62 for a reduced benefit, or age 66, which is the full retirement age, for a 50% benefit. It's usually a permanent reduction. Once you check the box and make the decision, it's usually irreversible after a period of time. The spouse can't file until the higher earning spouse files. You must be married to the worker for at least a year, unless already receiving auxiliary benefits, such as survivor benefits. So let's jump in here. And I'm going to ask that you excuse the stereotypical nature of the slide. You have to understand that most individuals in this country who receive spousal benefits are women. So for the purposes of clarity, we're using a slightly politically incorrect slide here. But you have to understand that Social Security is completely gender neutral. So those circumstances as, quote, belonging to the wife would belong to the husband, certainly also, given the same circumstances. So let's jump into this example. Meet John and Jane. John, in this case, is the higher earner. The spousal benefit, as we discussed, is usually about 50% of the primary worker's amount. So John's primary insurance amount is $2,000, and that's based on John's record. Jane's, based on her record, is $800, which is lower than John's, obviously. However, Jane's able to apply now for a spousal benefit based on John's record. So if she applies at full retirement age, her benefit will be 50% of John's, which in this case is $1,000. Now, it makes a lot of sense for Jane to apply for the spousal benefit based on John's record because, as you see, that's $200 more than her own benefit based on her own record. Does that make sense? Okay. Well, that's good. I'm glad you understand. So, survivor benefits. In addition to retirement and spousal benefits, married couples must also consider survivor's benefits. The timing of when you take your Social Security benefit can greatly affect the amount of income available to your spouse should you die first. And it works like this. The surviving spouse generally receives the greater benefit, either what the higher earning spouse was receiving or his or own benefit, whichever is higher. And it works like this. The amount that the surviving spouse actually receives depends on two factors, and this is very important. The first is when the deceased spouse actually filed for their benefit. So did they take delayed credits? Therefore, they got a higher benefit and hence a higher spousal survivor benefit. Or did they take early benefits? This will affect the survivor benefit as well. And also, number two, what's important is when the surviving spouse, after her spouse dies, decides to file for their own benefit. So in other words, if the higher earning spouse takes an early benefit and dies, the surviving spouse, unfortunately, would get a permanently reduced survival benefit. Very important, and these are things you need to know if these circumstances apply to you. So if you're the higher earner, folks, it's a very, very important conversation to have. And your spouse's life expectancy is much longer than yours. These are very important considerations, and this is a very important conversation to have with your spouse. I can't emphasize that enough. So lastly, in the survivor benefits, usually the survival benefit is payable as early as age 60, but because that's before full retirement age, that would be subject to a reduction as well. Okay, this is an interesting slide, and I'd like to show this to you. The reason is it illustrates why it's important for spouses to have the conversations and decide really what is the best time to start collecting benefits for both of you. In this example, you can see, and I'm going to use my pointer here, you have spouse one and spouse two. Two decisions. They start to draw their benefits at age 62, at full retirement age at age 66. This is the collective income. Or they can wait, of course, as you know, until age 70 and collect a much higher amount. Well, these numbers are kind of dramatic. If both spouses claim benefits later, that is, they claim at age 70 versus age 62, The joint monthly income is almost double. You see the 5241 versus the 2784 than that of age 62, or almost $30,000 a year more. That's a big number. Additionally, if spouse one, the higher earner, claims delayed benefits, well, that's a plus in terms of the survivor benefit because the survivor benefit for spouse two increases. Now, again, this doesn't take into account other factors that this hypothetical couple may have to take into consideration. So let's cover the strategy that I mentioned before called the restricted application strategy. You may recall back in 2015, the Bipartisan Act had effectively eliminated several Social Security claiming strategies, file and suspend, that were on the table that enabled individuals to really maximize their income given certain circumstances. Well, these particular and specialized strategies are really a dying breed, but one was left on the table. And this is it. It's called the restricted application strategy, or otherwise known as claim now, claim more later. But it's got some strings attached, and let's take a look. You have to have been born either on or before January 1st, 1954. And it works as follows. It allows the higher earning spouse to collect a spousal benefit based on the lower earning spouse's record, and then later collect their own higher benefit. I'm going to run through an example. That sounds confusing. I see a couple of squinting eyes here. Again, it allows the higher earning spouse to let their benefit continue to grow, but meanwhile, they can collect a spousal benefit based on the lower earning spouse. And it's going to clear it up when I go through the example. Let's look at an example. Meet Larry and Linda. Larry and Linda are both age 66. Larry, in this case, is the higher earner. Larry's primary insurance amount is $2,400. Linda's PIA is $800. So this is how it goes. At age 66, Linda files for her benefit and begins collecting based purely on her work record. And then subsequently at age 66, Larry files for Linda's benefit, the spousal benefit, at the same time, and he begins collecting $400, which is one half of Linda's primary insurance amount. You see, she's getting $800. Larry is able to get half of that at age 66. But here's the thing. Then at age 70, while Larry and they're both collecting income at age 66, they've opened up the income spigot now 4 years earlier, 66 to 70. At age 70, Larry collects a larger benefit now based on his own record. So he turns off the spousal benefit, collects his own benefit based on his delayed retirement credits, and that benefit is a lot higher than the spousal benefit he was getting off of Linda. And then additionally, Linda now adds her spousal benefit. And this is not based on her record, this is based on Larry's record, which is going to be higher than what she was getting. So she turns on the spousal benefit based on Larry's higher benefit, assuming it was larger than her own. Is that clear? So here are some of the benefits and the requirements, and I'd be happy to explain this in more detail, folks, if you approach me afterwards or offline, because this can be confusing. So here are some of the benefits and the requirements to the restricted application strategy. Why you might want to do this? Well, first you have to qualify. You have to have been born on January 1st, on or before January 1st, 1954. But it potentially increases the joint monthly survivor income. How does it do that? Well, yes, Linda is receiving her spousal benefit because she filed. Now, Larry would ordinarily wait until age 70 to get his delayed credit. He's going to get a higher credit, but now he can turn it up 4 years earlier at age 66 and receive a spousal benefit based on Linda's work record. So it increases the joint income. Number two, now since Larry can turn off that spousal benefit and now take his own higher credit, his own higher benefit, it increases the survivor's benefit because that benefit is based on the higher earner's benefit. But here are the requirements. Again, you have to have been born on or before 1954. You can only use it at full retirement age. The lower earner must have already filed for their own benefit, and only one spouse may do this at a time. Again, you have to take into consideration other factors such as age, benefit differences, other sources of retirement income, etc. So We've covered a lot of information here. We're coming to the end. We looked at some of the major questions, why you need to consider, begin an important decision when to start taking Social Security. I'm just going to simply recap why you might decide you want to take it earlier. Number one, you need the income right away. We covered that. Number two, you consider yourself an astute investor, okay? You think you can do better investing your own benefit versus what Social Security does. Now, mind you, that's before taxes. Number three, you want to delay having to take funds from other retirement vehicles. Again, let those other tax-deferred accounts continue to grow. And number four, your spouse wants to wait till the age 70 to take their benefit, so you might as well open up the income stream now and start taking your benefit earlier. Here's why you might want to take the benefits later. You want obviously a higher monthly retirement benefit, the delayed credit. Number two, you want to maximize the survivor's income. Number three, you don't plan on quitting to work. You don't really need the money right now, okay? So you plan on working longer, and you want to delay your benefit, and perhaps taxes come into play also. And lastly, four, you're able to file what's called the restricted application strategy. That is, you file for spousal benefits first, and then you switch to your own benefit later. So there are a lot of sources to help you as far as Social Security. I suggest that you start with the Social Security Administration. They have a fairly good website there. But you have to understand this, they're limited in terms of the scope that they can, the help they can offer. They can certainly help you estimate benefits, and they can tell you what you're entitled to. But it's not their job to do long-range financial planning or long-range Social Security forecasting, et cetera. This is where a firm like ours can help. They can help you with different strategies designed to maximize your benefits. So some things to think about as you're thinking about your own situation. So last thing I want you to do is be like these guys. Social Security is too important for guesswork or stress work. You've been a wonderful audience, and I want to thank you for coming. Retirement can be an exciting time, but with it, it comes with a lot of challenges. When you're ready to make the decision about your Social Security, I hope you will certainly take the time, because there is some needed to explore your different options. I'd welcome the opportunity to speak with all of you if you want to approach me afterwards or reach out to me about your own individual situation. So on that note, I want to thank you. I'm going to ask you if you could maybe fill out the evaluation form and either hand it to myself or Wendy. And now we're going to open it up to questions. I want to thank you for your time. Thank you. So Wendy, how much time do we have now? 7:05, about 15 minutes. Okay, good. We're about 5 minutes over. Okay. Okay, so there's a question here, a very good question. We didn't cover it